The house was too quiet that evening. I sat alone in the living room, sinking into the well-worn armchair by the fireplace. The embers glowed faintly, casting long shadows that danced against the walls. Soon after my husband passed, these quiet moments became a double-edged sword. They gave me space to reminisce, but also served as a reminder of what was no longer there. I traced the rim of my teacup absent-mindedly, feeling the warmth seep into my palms while my mind wandered back to those yesterdays filled with laughter and familiar voices. Our family once felt like an unbreakable circle. My children, Derek and Hannah, had grown from lively toddlers into complex adults. I remember holding each of them close on nights like this, promising to protect them, nurture them, and hold our family together through every storm. Yet as the years unraveled that promise, so did the bonds between us. The corners of this old home now seemed sharper, as though the walls themselves were watching in silent judgment. The cameras were a recent addition installed reluctantly after a small burglary in the neighborhood startled me awake one night. What was meant as a precaution, a way to keep the house safe, soon became a window into a world I scarcely recognized. Beneath my calm facade, they planted seeds of suspicion. I felt exposed, as if my privacy had been invaded by not only lenses but unseen eyes. Yet, my curiosity stirred as I imagined what might be caught on those recordings, what truths might emerge in the stillness when everyone thought I was simply resting. That night, I did not sleep well. Restless, I listened from the shadows of the hallway as muffled voices rose and fell behind closed doors. They were voices I used to trust my children's voices, but tonight, they carried a bitterness that rooted itself deep in my chest. I crept closer, barely daring to breathe as I pressed my ear to the crack of Hannah's room. Derek's voice was smooth but cold, his words carefully measured. I caught fragments, words like control, guardianship, inheritance, and she's losing it. My breath hitched. Their plan was far darker than I could have ever imagined. They weren't just discontent or impatient, they intended to declare me mentally unfit to wrest my assets away. They believed I was fading, and they meant to take everything I owned and leave me powerless. I felt as if the air had been sucked from the room. Standing frozen in the hall, the weight of their betrayal crushed me deeper than any argument or fight ever could. These were my children, my flesh and blood, the ones I had carried through sleepless nights and sacrifice-filled days. Yet now they plotted to strip me of my dignity and life's work. I had spent decades building stability for the family, defending it against hardships with quiet strength. And now, I was to be cast aside like an inconvenient shadow, discarded when they saw fit. Staggering back into the living room, I settled into the chair, clutching a worn blanket over my knees. A dull ache spread in my chest, one that was neither anger nor sadness but a strange mix of both. I was hurt beyond language, but it was not my nature to crumble in the face of pain. Instead, a cold clarity began to settle in. The truth was harsh, but undeniable. My children, the ones I had given everything for, were no longer the little souls I had loved. Their eyes gleamed with greed, their hearts had grown distant, and their sense of entitlement had poisoned every memory we once shared. I thought back to when Derek was a boy, how his laughter filled this very room, how Hannah used to curl up beside me, trusting and warm. The silence that followed was deafening. Tears threatened to spill, but I swallowed them, steadying my breath. It was a unique kind of sorrow, the kind that sharpens resolve. I knew then that my world had shifted irrevocably, and somehow, I had to find a way to stand firm against this storm. The cameras had felt intrusive before, but now their presence became a strange comfort. They might just be the silent witnesses I needed. If my own flesh and blood intended to undermine me, I would watch back, steady and quiet, gathering every whisper and gesture. This home, which had once sheltered only love, was now the battleground of betrayal. I stared at the black screen of the security monitor, the faint red light blinking, watching, recording. In the silence, I vowed to myself that I would not let this injustice pass unnoticed. I would face the unimaginable, but not broken or defeated. They plotted in the dark, but I would illuminate every lie, every secret, every plan. The quiet strength I had honed over the years would become my weapon. In the hush of that long night, I realized the cruel truth. Family did not always mean protection. Sometimes it meant wounds that cut deeper than strangers' knives. But I would survive. I would endure, and in the end, the truth would be my shield. Only then did I allow myself to weep, not for what was lost, but for what I refused to lose, the dignity that no betrayal could steal. I was no longer the woman who naively believed in unconditional love without question. I was a mother who had learned to watch in silence, to wait, and to fight when no one was looking. The days that followed were marked by a quiet stillness that enveloped the house like a thick curtain. I chose not to confront Derek or Hannah immediately. The pain of their betrayal was a heavy cloak draped over my heart, but I refused to let it unravel me in haste. Instead, I turned inward, retreating into a reflective silence where I could gather my thoughts and steel my resolve. My children moved through the rooms with practiced ease, pretending as if the warmth and love we once shared had not cracked beneath the weight of their deceit. Their smiles were strained, their eyes wary, but I kept my silence. There was power in patience, and I intended to wield it carefully. My mind was awash with memories, the echo of childhood laughter, tender embraces, the countless sacrifices that had woven our family's fabric. I remembered the nights I stayed awake, easing their fears and mending wounds, giving my dreams away piece by piece so their hopes might take flight. How many paths had I abandoned, quiet ambitions shelved to build a secure, loving home. Love had been my compass, and I believed it would always guide us safely. Yet, that love had mutated into something I barely recognized: cold entitlement and hidden schemes. The children I once cradled with hope had grown into strangers fueled by greed. Though the ache of loneliness settled in, I embraced it as part of my strength. Silence was no longer merely the absence of sound, it was becoming my sentinel and shield. It allowed me to observe without revealing my pain, to analyze every gesture and whispered word behind closed doors. The cameras, once an intrusive thought, had now become my steadfast allies. Each night, I sat before the flickering screen, absorbing their conversations and actions. Hidden narratives unfolded with clarity, hushed plans, conspiratorial looks, subtle manipulations, a bitter testament to betrayal within these very walls. Alongside this new vigilance, I sought refuge in the books that lined my study shelf. Years ago, I'd immersed myself in legal knowledge not with professional intent, but as a safeguard for my family. What once felt like dusty relics now shone with renewed purpose. I dusted off old tomes on estate law, guardianship, and mental competency, drawing strength from their pages. I committed hours to decipher jargon, understanding the framework that could protect me. Each legal concept became a tool, another piece of armor against the threat that had stealthily crept inside my home. Patiently, methodically, I began to craft a strategy. Emotional outbursts or hurried accusations would serve only to confirm their plans and weaken my position. Instead, I channeled my energy into building a silent fortress of evidence. Every whisper caught on tape, every suspicious word or gesture was logged with precision: dates, times, locations into a growing archive. This meticulous dossier was both a burden and a shield, a tangible manifestation of the betrayal I faced. Holding it in my hands felt like reclaiming a sliver of power long thought lost. Amidst this purposeful preparation, I confronted the complexity of my emotions. The pain of betrayal twisted with sorrow, but it no longer overwhelmed me. The endless tears of yesterday had subsided, replaced by a quiet resolve that warmed me from within. I'd moved beyond mourning what our family once was. Now I fought to protect what I still could control. The love I bore was no longer naive. It was tempered by experience and hardened by necessity. I wrestled with the question that haunted me. Was I battling against my children, or was I fighting for myself? The answer was neither simple nor painless, but clarity emerged with time. This was not blind retaliation, it was a measured, deliberate defense. They had sought to diminish me, to steal the life I had built. I would meet their treachery with steadfast composure, wielding the quiet power of patience and knowledge. The rooms grew quieter, the absence of laughter and warmth settling uneasily in the spaces they left behind. But in that silence, I found freedom. No longer tethered to their approval or needs, I embraced my autonomy. I felt my own worth rekindle a dignity untouched by their greed or scheming. In the quiet hours, I envisioned a new life unfolding, one authored on my terms and no one else's. Love had changed its shape, but it had not vanished. It now stood guarded and fierce, a silent sentinel watching over both my heart and my future. As I observed my children plotting their next moves, I too prepared mine. They believed their entitlement gave them the upper hand, but they underestimated how deep my resolve ran and how sharp my insight could be. In this silence, I reclaimed the power that betrayal tried to rob me of. I was no longer simply a mother who gave all. I was Eleanor, guardian of my own truth, rising steady and strong, ready to act with quiet certainty when the moment arrived. From that point onward, I turned the cameras into my allies, devices that bore silent witness to every clandestine conversation, every furtive glance, every veiled temptation to betray. What had started as a reluctant precaution to protect my home had become the eye of a storm I now commanded. The faces of Derek and Hannah, once familiar and warm, transformed before my eyes into masks of calculation and greed. Each recorded moment added another thread to the tapestry of deception they wove so expertly within the confines of this house. I began meticulously monitoring their interactions, not merely during the day but extending into the quiet hours where secrets thrived. The dim glow from the security monitor became my constant companion, a portal into the hidden layers of my family's unfolding drama. I watched as gestures and tones betrayed intentions that words alone could not reveal. Their casual smile when discussing finances, the hurried whispers behind closed doors, the subtle coercion of acquaintances to join their cause, it all emerged from the shadows into harsh light. Recognizing I could not face this challenge alone, I reached out discreetly to a trusted friend, a lawyer who understood the delicate balance of family and law. Jonah and I had known each other for decades. Her wisdom and discretion were a lifeline in these turbulent waters. I met her quietly in her office, a place that smelled of leather-bound volumes and determination. There, I laid bare the evidence I had gathered, recordings, documented conversations, and the subtle betrayals etched into every interaction. Jonah listened intently without a word of shock or pity. She understood immediately the magnitude of what I faced. With her guidance, I began to unravel the complicated legal avenues before me. We discussed powers of attorney, guardianship laws, and the protections available for someone in my vulnerable position when trust was so horribly abused. Jonah emphasized the importance of gathering undeniable proof, black and white evidence that would clearly show the malicious intent behind Derek and Hannah's actions. Passion and pain would only sway sympathies briefly. The law required facts, a precise and unassailable case. I pored over every recording, sorting and labeling each clip a testament to their growing greed and cold disregard. I listened with an acute ear for lies, omissions, and manipulations. Each time, I noted the threats, the attempts to undermine my mental stability, the secret meetings behind my back. They had mastered the art of quiet deception, but the cameras were a relentless eye that spared no detail. I began compiling a detailed dossier, each entry cataloged with dates, times, and descriptions, structured to expose their plot in a way the law would recognize. Occasionally, I caught glimpses of their manipulation extending beyond our walls. They engaged with financial advisors and distant relatives, seeking allies without a hint of conscience. Their greed was a raging tide aiming to sweep me away, but every wave was recorded, every whisper meticulously chronicled. The house, once a safe haven of warmth and history, had become a battlefield where silent skirmishes of wit and strategy determined the future of all I held dear. Despite this deepening complexity, I maintained an outward calm. My every day was a delicate dance between maintaining appearances and advancing my quiet plan. I engaged Derek and Hannah as though unaware, hiding the fire that burned beneath. Their arrogance was their weakness. They did not fathom the depth of my observation or the extent of my preparation. This deception was a strategy as necessary and precise as any move on a chessboard. Through it all, strength came from the quiet moments. I found respite in the familiar routines, the brewing of morning tea, the careful watering of my garden, the soft rustle of pages as I continued to study laws and legal precedents. These acts grounded me, offering a sense of normalcy amid the gathering storm. In these rituals remained the essence of who I was beyond the conflict, a woman who had loved fiercely, who had built a life with care, who still possessed iron-willed resilience beneath a calm exterior. The dossier grew heavy with evidence, its increasingly intimidating volume a stark contrast to my serene demeanor. I imagined a day when these pages would serve as my shield, when the voices captured in their fibrous depths would be heard not as betrayals, but as irrefutable proof under the cold gaze of justice. I envisioned the moment when the truth, long buried in whispered plans and thinly veiled threats, would be brought into the light to stand as a testament to my strength and survival. Yet, the true challenge was subtle, the balancing act between emotional endurance and methodical planning. Every day, I reminded myself that this was not a battle fought in tantrums or tears but in stealth and wisdom. A mother who had loved and sacrificed could not afford reckless outbursts. She needed the clarity of patience and the precision of law on her side. As the days turned into weeks, I was ever mindful of the emotional toll of this silent war. There were nights when exhaustion threatened to swallow me whole, when the ache of loneliness nearly overwhelmed the calm I guarded so fiercely. But in those moments, I revisited the memories of better days, not to wallow in grief, but to remind myself why I fought, why the betrayal stung so deeply, because it was so personal. These memories became both fuel and fortification, spurring me onward with the knowledge that I would never again let my protectiveness be exploited. My children moved with increasing impatience, a sign that they were sensing the shifts beneath my quiet. Their glances, once laden with confidence, now flickered with doubt. Yet they remained unaware that every move they made was being recorded, every ploy catalogued and analyzed. I was their antithesis, the silent fortress standing in the shadows, unmoved and unyielding. In those quiet hours, I also felt a small but fierce hope blossoming within me, the hope that justice was not merely an abstract ideal but a tangible force within my grasp. I imagined standing before the authorities with the weight of truth firmly in my hands, setting the record straight not just for myself but for the dignity and respect I deserved as a mother and as a woman who would not be diminished. Through the haze of conflicted emotions and strategic maneuvers, the personality I had honed over years crystallized sharply. I was calm when others might rage, patient when haste could prove fatal. I had become a master of observation, interpreting not just words but silences, reading between the lines with an insight born of love and betrayal. This was a different battle than any before, silent, cerebral, and ruthless in its quiet fury. While Derek and Hannah plotted to seize control, I was quietly assembling a fortress no greed could breach, a fortress built from truth, patience, and unwavering resolve. The lines were drawn, the players set, and in this silent game of power and betrayal, the mother who had once given everything was no longer vulnerable but vigilant and victorious in the making. With the dossier complete and my resolve unwavering, I set about the next phase of my plan with careful, deliberate steps. Every move was cloaked in calm, as I continued to wear the mask of the unassuming mother while quietly rebuilding the walls everyone thought I had forgotten how to raise. Derek and Hannah were restless, their growing impatience thinly veiled beneath forced patience. They could smell the shift, that subtle change in the air that told them the game was no longer theirs to control. Yet they remained blind to the invisible but impenetrable barriers I had begun erecting, a labyrinth of contracts, accounts, and legal maneuverings designed to protect everything I had built. I started by methodically transferring funds and assets out of their reach, moving money into accounts and trusts with the precision of someone threading a needle in the dark. This was a silent rebellion. Every transfer, every document signed and notarized, was executed without fanfare or noise, keeping them blissfully unaware that their access was quietly being severed. I sold the vacant property my late husband and I had once cherished, not out of sentiment, because the place had become a hollow reminder of everything tainted by greed and mistrust, but as a calculated step to liquidate assets and divert funds safely away. The sale was brisk and discreet, completed in a matter of days with no hint to my children that anything was amiss. Balancing secrecy with thoroughness demanded more emotional discipline than I expected. I refused to give them any doubts or details that would expose my plan ahead of time. Their casual remarks about finances or veiled threats of court battles were met with a smile or a vague deflection. In public or private, I was the calm eye in their growing storm of entitlement. Their arrogance impaired their judgment. They assumed my age or emotions put me at a disadvantage. But beneath my quiet demeanor, I was relentlessly building a fortress no one could breach. The emotional cost of this clandestine warfare weighed heavily on me. Exhaustion often pooled in the hollows beneath my eyes, but I drew strength from the memory of their betrayal. That wound, though painful, had become the forge where my unwavering resolve was tempered. I reminded myself daily that this was a battle far removed from fiery outbursts or desperate pleas. It was fought in silence, with patience, and with an unshakable determination to reclaim my life and dignity. As I moved money, sold property, and closed loopholes one by one, a strange sense of liberation blossomed. Each discreet act was a reclaiming of control, a silent victory for my peace of mind and for the legacy I still wished to protect. The atmosphere in the house shifted too. Where once bitter words and tense glances roamed freely, there was now a still, steady rhythm that echoed nothing but strength cloaked in serenity. The shadows of my family's fractured past lingered on the walls, but they no longer dictated the pulse of my home. Their attempts to unsettle me became more frequent, though increasingly ineffective. Derek asked pointed questions disguised as concern, probing for any hint of change. Hannah's tone bore sharper edges, her polite inquiries bordering on thinly veiled accusations. But I held my ground, meeting their challenges with unshaking equanimity. My silence and calmness became the armor that rendered their jabs harmless. Their frustrations simmered beneath controlled exteriors, growing but unable to erupt. Throughout this time, my consultations with Jonah continued in hushed confidence. We refined each legal strategy, reviewing guardianship laws, powers of attorney, and the protections available against undue influence or financial abuse. Joanna's expertise became my compass, guiding me through the maze of legal intricacies. Her belief in my case bolstered my confidence. I no longer felt isolated or vulnerable. Together, we built a plan that would not only safeguard my assets but expose Derek and Hannah's malfeasance beyond doubt. What others viewed as the twilight years of life, I came to see as a new dawn, a season not of retreat and resignation but of strength and self-assertion. I was no longer the mother yielding to the demands of her children, but a woman reborn through pain and vigilance. My quiet transformations reverberated beneath the surface, unsettling even me at moments. Yet it was the only path left, one carved through the hard soil of betrayal and watered with years of enduring patience. Amid this silent struggle, I found refuge in the small rituals of my daily life. Brewing tea each morning, tending to the garden, turning the pages of legal texts with steady hands, these acts anchored me, creating a semblance of normalcy that preserved my spirit. The creaking floorboards beneath my feet and the familiar scent of aged wood became reminders not just of the past but of the life I was determined to protect on my own terms. I faced the emotional reality with stark clarity. Derek and Hannah's affection was no longer unconditional but twisted by greed and vanity. That realization did not shatter me. Rather, it fortified my will. I cast aside the futile hope for their approval or love and focused instead on reclaiming control and respect. This fight, I understood, was as much for myself as it was for the legacy we shared. As the days passed, their frustration grew more pronounced. Rumors whispered their way about vanished funds or suddenly sold properties. Their once confident steps faltered in private. Their eyes sought cracks in my calm but found none. Lack of evidence held them back. They did not know that every action they took was being monitored, every whispered plan recorded and archived. That growing uncertainty worked in my favor, creating unease where once there had been bravado. It was a quiet reminder that the balance in our fractured family was tipping, the scales no longer favoring the greedy but protecting the just. So I waited. Poised and patient, I continued walking the fine line between the veneer of a loving, compliant mother and the steely architect of her own liberation. Each day was a silent victory, every unanswered provocation a testament to my growing control. My power was quiet but absolute, honed over years of sacrifice, observation, and survival. Underneath it all, a transformation unfolded. From the woman shattered by betrayal, I was becoming a force as sure and steady as the passing of time itself. Despite their relentless schemes, Derek and Hannah had not grasped the essential truth of this quiet war. I was, and would always be, the master of this house. And from that mastery rose a power that no amount of greed or manipulation could ever undo. The day Derek and Hannah returned home, their faces' mask of entitlement firmly in place, I did not flinch. They stepped through the front door confident that the throne was theirs to claim, that the years of quiet endurance had bent me into a shadow of compliance. But what they found was a mother transformed, a stillness that was neither fear nor submission but the calm of a fortress ready to defend itself. The house they once believed belonged to them was no place for easy conquest. The living room, that familiar stage of so many memories, held a different energy that day. Derek's eyes swept the room with searching calculation, and Hannah's crisp composure barely concealed a simmer of doubt. Confidence tried to hold firm, yet I sensed the cracks begin the beginning of their unraveling. I did not rush or plead. Instead, I allowed a thick silence to settle, drawing out their discomfort until it became palpable. Then, with deliberate motion, I activated the security monitor. The soft glow of the red indicator light pressed insistently against the dark. "We need to talk," I said, voice steady and clear, leaving no room for misinterpretation. What followed was a slow, unrelenting exposure of their true selves. One by one, the recordings played hidden conversations, whispered conspiracies, evidence of their intentions to strip me of my rights and dignity. They were caught plotting behind my back, their plans to declare me mentally unfit a matter of cold calculation. I watched their faces in the flickering glow, shock, disbelief, the cracking veneer of bravado. Hannah's eyes welled with tears of fury. Derek's mask of charm dissolved to reveal anger and dread. The room was thick with tension, an electric charge that seemed to pulse with the weight of decades of betrayal. This was not a battle they could charm or evade. When the last video ended, I looked at them unwavering. "The authorities have been informed," I said quietly, a statement that carried the certainty of final judgment. Their protests came in clumsy waves, denials, accusations, desperate attempts to rewrite the narrative. But their words fell on deaf ears. I was no longer the woman who could be swayed or silenced by empty promises or emotional blackmail. I had accumulated more than pain. I had gathered truth, evidence, and unwavering resolve. I told them firmly this was the end of their illusions. This house, this life, was not theirs to claim by force or deception. It belonged to me, carved out by years of sacrifice and love. I was no longer a passive figure to be pushed aside. I was a mother who had learned to watch silently, to wait, and finally, to stand. With those words came the severing of ties. Financial control remained in my hands, properties retained where they belonged, and the bonds of trust irrevocably broken. Derek and Hannah left, their faces heavy with shame and defeat, carrying away the weight of their own choices. The silence that settled afterward was no longer oppressive, it was the quiet peace of victory. Alone, I allowed suppressed emotions to surface, stares of release, a balm for wounds carved deep by betrayal. The pain, though still present, softened under the warmth of hard-earned strength. I found myself laughing softly in the stillness, a sound that filled every corner of the house, a quiet celebration of resilience and reclamation. I had survived the storm, not by loud defiance but by patient fortitude. The lessons of heartbreak had transformed me. I recognized myself anew, a woman stronger, wiser, and fiercely in control of her destiny. The quiet of the house was no longer a reminder of loss, but a sanctuary where my dignity was restored. In this silence, I triumphed, not through fury, but through calm, unyielding power, the power of a mother who observed, waited, and rose. The days that followed were marked by a calm I had not known in years, a stillness that seeped into the very bones of the house, soft yet profound. Derek and Hannah's sudden absence left a space filled not with emptiness but with possibility. Their departure felt like the closing of a painful chapter, one heavy with betrayal and fractured dreams. And now, in this quiet, I found a chance to breathe again, to reclaim the rhythm of my own life. The walls of this house, once echoing with tension and mistrust, welcomed me with their steady embrace. The familiar creak of the floorboards beneath my feet, the scent of old wood and worn fabric, became gentle reminders of a life I was ready to rebuild on my own terms. The rooms no longer felt like traps or battlegrounds, but safe havens where I could finally find peace. I returned to small routines that grounded me, brewing tea in the morning light, tending to the garden where flowers bloomed with patient grace, and sitting by the window with a book or a journal in hand. These moments of quiet became my refuge, each one stitching together pieces of a renewed spirit. The house listened quietly as I rediscovered the subtle joys I had set aside for so long. The memories lingered, shadows that sometimes softened with time, but they no longer held the power to wound. I learned to hold them gently, seeing them as the teachers of hard-earned lessons rather than sources of pain. The tears I shed in private were no longer solely for loss, but for the strength that had grown in its place. They were a tribute to resilience, a reminder that even in the deepest valleys, light could be found. In this solitude, I began to dream again, not the dreams surrendered to sacrifice or shattered by betrayal, but new hopes born from clarity and self-respect. I explored passions I had long postponed, writing letters to myself filled with reflections and aspirations, planning visits to places I had always wanted to see, and simply learning to enjoy moments of stillness without fear or expectation. Most importantly, I found a deep well of self-worth within me, a quiet power rooted in integrity, courage, and the unshakable knowledge that my worth did not hinge on others' approval or greed. It was a treasure more valuable than any financial estate, a legacy I could carry with me wherever life took me. Though the scars of betrayal remained, they no longer defined me. I carried them as reminders of what I had endured and overcome, not as chains to bind me. My heart, though marked, beat with renewed strength and purpose. In the sanctuary of my home, I reclaimed my story. I was no longer a woman broken by deceit, but one who had watched, waited, and risen with unwavering resolve. The silence was no longer an absence, but a powerful presence, a beautiful testament to victory won not with fury, but with quiet strength. In that calm, I found my true liberation, and finally, in the silence, I triumphed.